We are reading Revelation. We are reading about John's vision. The Apostle John is in the middle of a vision in which his spirit, let me get the right picture up here. There we go. Okay. In which John's spirit, he says over and over again, in the spirit, he's not physically going up to heaven, but his spirit has been taken up to heaven in this vision. And he is describing everything that he sees. And so he sees God sitting on the throne. And so he describes all of that. And he sees just all of this amazing stuff and describes it in great detail. Sees all these angels and the 24 elders and these weird, crazy creatures that are covered with eyes. And so he describes all of that for us. And then he notices that God is holding in his hand a scroll that has been sealed with 7 wax seals. And then there is an angel that is announcing around heaven that there is no one worthy, and no one in heaven, no one on earth, no one underneath the earth is worthy to break the seals and open and read the scroll. Okay, so this angel is announcing this. And this news makes John so terribly sad that he tells us he was weeping greatly, that no one was found worthy to break the seals and open the scroll. Okay, so what in the world is on the scroll that would make John so sad that he's going to weep greatly because it can't be broken and opened and read? Now, I believe that what was on this scroll is God's will for humanity. Why in the world do I believe that? Because according to Roman law, a will, somebody's last testament and will would be sealed exactly like this, in a scroll, and it would be sealed with 7 seals, just like this. Not 8 seals, not 6, 7 seals. Okay, and each seal would have been put on there by a different witness, a different person would put that seal on so that you have 7 witnesses saying this is indeed the last will and testament of this person. Okay, John would have known that. I believe that's why we see a scroll with 7 seals. So that John would have immediately known, because he's familiar with Roman law, that this is a will. And not only is it a will, this is God's will. It's God's will for humanity. And because it's rolled up and sealed shut, that means that God's will cannot be accomplished on the earth. That's why John's crying. That's why this is such a terrible thing. Okay, so why is God's will rolled up and sealed shut? Okay, so here's why I think it's rolled up and sealed shut. And for this, we need to go all the way back to the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve. Okay, so remember when God created the earth and he created Adam and Eve, put them in the Garden of Eden. So what was the covenant that he made with them? Okay, he made a covenant of free will, right? And then gave them the earth. He said, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. Okay, so God gave them this covenant of free will. So you can make your own choices. You can have, and I will give you the earth. And you can have anything that you want on this earth except one thing. And what was that? He made one agreement, one condition. And that was, you cannot eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was it. They could do anything they wanted. They had everything on the whole earth. And they had one condition. And then you know the story. What happened next? The serpent came, Satan came, tricked Eve into eating this forbidden fruit. Then she gave some to Adam. And so they both sinned. They broke the covenant with God. They broke the one condition that he had given them. And they disobeyed God, and instead they obeyed Satan. So when they did that, sin entered the world. They gave the earth that God had given to them, and they gave it to Satan instead. And so that is when I believe that scroll of God's will was rolled up and it was sealed shut by this new covenant that they made with Satan when they gave the earth to Satan. Okay, so from that time forward, the very beginning of Adam and Eve, when sin entered the world, from that time forward, Satan was the legal contractual owner of the earth until Jesus came and shed his blood and then rose again. So that was 4,000 years. That Satan was the legal contractual owner of the earth. Okay, from the time that Adam and Eve sinned until Jesus came and shed his blood. So that is why I believe that the scroll that is being held in God's hand, that cannot be opened and is sealed shut, is God's will for humanity. And that's why it was sealed shut. And so I believe that when John sees that at the beginning of that vision, he's actually going back in time. So he's going back to before Jesus came, or before Jesus died on the cross. Okay, so we're going back in time. And the angel is saying, there's no one worthy to break the seal. So because what is required in order to break those seals and break and cancel the contract between Satan and humanity is for someone to fulfill the law. And no one has been able to do that. Okay, so you remember, then John is weeping greatly. And then, oh, hold on, I forgot to say something. Okay, here's one of my proofs for what I am saying. So when Jesus came to earth, and remember when he was being tempted by Satan in the wilderness, and Satan said, one of the temptations, he said, if you will bow down and worship me, I will give you all of this, the earth. And so he had the right to say that to Jesus, because he, at that time, was the legal owner of the earth. So he didn't know what Jesus had in store, what Jesus had up his sleeve, and that Jesus had another plan to break the contract and cancel that contract with the enemy. He didn't have to worship Satan. Of course not. I don't think that Satan knew what was coming. Not at all. Satan does not know the future. Okay, so anyway, so we're back to the vision, and John is weeping greatly, and then one of the elders who's sitting around the throne of God tells John, stop weeping, because now someone is worthy now. And so then we see in the vision, we see this lamb. Okay, and the way it's described is the lamb, the lamb that was slain, the Lion of Judah, and we see that it has a wound. It has been slain. It is very clear from the way that it is described that they are talking about Jesus Christ. And so then there erupts this huge celebration in heaven, and everybody is praising God and thanking Jesus, the Lamb, for what he has accomplished, because now he is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll of God's will. Finally, someone is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll because of what the Lamb has accomplished. And what has he accomplished? He has lived a perfect, sinless life. So he fulfilled the law. Then he died for us, and he shed his blood to be the perfect sacrifice for us. And then he rose again. And then he ascended back up to heaven. And so I believe that when John is seeing all of this happening, okay, when he sees the Lamb in this big, huge celebration in heaven, and everybody's praising God and thanking Jesus for what he's accomplished, that happened right when Jesus ascended back up into heaven. Okay, because that's when this would have taken place, this big celebration. That's when Jesus was celebrating the accomplishment, what he has done and accomplished on earth. So it's going back in time a little bit, because you remember John is having this vision after Jesus. It's probably 30 or so years after Jesus had ascended back to heaven. So he's still going back in time at this point in the vision. All right. So that is what is happening so far. Okay. And then we see the Lamb goes up to God and takes the scroll out of God's hand. And then what he starts doing is going through and breaking the seals one by one. And here's where it gets really, really different and weird, opposite from what most of us have been taught. Because what we have been taught, premillennialists believe that when those seals are broken, the 4 horsemen and all those terrible things, that's something that's going to happen in the future. So it would have been at least 2,000 years in the future from when John had this vision, okay? And still in the future for us. That's what we've been taught, the premillennialist timeline. So, but what I believe, the partial preterist interpretation of this, is that what we are actually seeing when these seals get broken, the 4 horsemen, we're going to go over that again real quick, and the other seals being broken, that what we were seeing is the witnesses of those seals. Because remember, when in Roman law, when a last will and testament is sealed shut, the 7 seals are put on there by 7 different witnesses. Okay, so what we are witnessing, what we are seeing, is the rights, the legal rights that Satan had gotten when sin entered the world way back when in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve sinned. So when sin entered the world, all of these bad things started roaming the earth and were contractually allowed to happen on the earth. So for thousands of years, for 4,000 years until Jesus came, all of these seals, these witnesses, the four horsemen, and the other things that we're going to go over again in a minute, those have been roaming the earth, doing all of their damage, spreading all of this poison of Satan, of the enemy, for all of these years. And so when the seals are broken, it's the opposite of what premillennialists tell us. It is actually the end. It's the breaking of the contract with the enemy to have the right to do these things on the earth. That's why at this same time, we are seeing this huge celebration in heaven, because it doesn't make sense that there would be this huge celebration and everybody's praising. Oh, thank you, God, you're so wonderful. And now let's go kill everybody on the earth. That doesn't make any sense. No, because breaking the seals is actually a good thing, because it is canceling the contract that Satan had with the earth, with humanity. It is breaking his legal right to be the owner of the earth, because now Jesus has conquered sin and death by his death on the cross and resurrection and ascension back up into heaven. And now Jesus has taken over the authority of the earth again, the way it was meant to be when God originally created the earth. Does this make sense? Okay, so let's look at those seals really fast. Now, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because we've already been going through these. Okay, so they broke the first seal. I believe this first seal was Satan himself. It's the white horse, and he was given a bow, and the word for bow is toxin, T-O-X-O-N. It means poison. And so from the moment sin entered the earth, when Adam and Eve sinned, Satan has been free to conquer the earth with his poison all this time until Jesus resurrected from the dead. And so now that his seal has been broken, the second seal was the red horse, and it is war. And this horseman was given a sword, and he was granted the right to take peace from the earth so that people would kill each other. And we see that happening right away with Cain and Abel. That's Adam and Eve's two sons, because Cain murdered Abel. And so immediately after Satan's new contract with humanity, we see murder starts happening. And then it was able to, murders and wars all over the earth for thousands of years. And now that contract has been broken. All right, third seal, famine. What is the curse that was put on Adam when he sinned? God told him, you will toil and labor to grow your food now. Before this happened, it was easy. The food was just growing plentifully in the garden. They didn't have to do anything for it. Now he's got to do backbreaking labor in order to feed himself. And so famine is the third seal, but now that seal has been broken. And the fourth seal is death. And we see so much how death entered into the earth after Adam and Eve sinned. Because when God first created Adam and Eve, he created them with glorified bodies. They were supposed to live forever. They were perfect. Everything God created was good and perfect until they sinned. And sin and death, this fourth seal, entered into the earth. And so, of course, Adam and Eve died. And of course, now every human being, until Jesus comes back, every human being is going to die. So death has entered the earth, and not only with humans, but also with animals. Because before Adam and Eve sinned, they didn't eat animals, and the animals didn't eat each other. They didn't kill each other. There was no death at all. And so when death entered the earth, and then animals started killing and eating each other. And then humans started killing and eating animals. And not only the animals and the humans, but also all of the earth was now under this curse of death. And now everything falls apart and decays and rots. And none of that was according to God's original plan. So you can see how I believe from all of this that that's how God's will was rolled up and sealed shut. Because none of this stuff, all of these seals, this was not according to God's original will when he created the earth. Okay, so his will had been sealed shut from the sin of Adam and Eve and this new contract between Satan and humanity. Okay, so that's the four horsemen of the apocalypse, these, the infamous four horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay, the next seal. And the next seal is broken, and John sees all of these martyrs underneath God's throne. And they say, they're crying out, God, when is our blood going to be avenged? And God gives them all white robes and says, just wait a little bit longer. There are going to be more martyrs. So I believe that these are the martyrs from the Old Testament. Jesus had talked about these martyrs in Matthew 23 when he told the Pharisees that all of the martyrs, the blood of the martyrs from all of the Old Testament, from Abel to Zechariah, that's from the beginning of the Old Testament to the end of the Old Testament, all of that blood is on your hands, he told the Pharisees. And he also told them, you are of your father, the devil. So this was another thing that was released upon the earth, was Satan's legal right to kill and to destroy people for their faith and their belief in God. Okay. And there are soon at this point going to be more, because the first century of the church, the first century was one of the most brutal time periods for Christian persecution of Christians. So there will soon, at this point, when John is seeing this vision, there will be more martyrs, unfortunately. All right, then the sixth seal. Okay, then this starts talking about all of the these terrible things happening, and earthquakes and natural disasters and all of this stuff. And so this is exactly the same story, the same thing that we see Jesus talking about in Matthew 24. Okay, we went over this verse by verse back in November and December. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now, but what is very clear, if you go through verse by verse, that Jesus was answering the disciples' question, when is the temple going to be destroyed? Because if you go back to Matthew 24, Jesus had told the disciples, they're in Jerusalem, and he says, see this temple? It's going to be completely destroyed. And the disciples say, when is this going to happen? This just sounds terrible. They can't imagine. And he starts telling them all these things to look out for. This is how you will know when this temple is going to be destroyed. Okay. And he says, these are just birth pangs of all the stuff that's going to happen beforehand, the earthquakes and all of that stuff. And so I believe this sixth seal is that same thing. Okay. It's the very end of what we're coming up on when we open the seventh seal today, and what we're going to talk about, which is when Jerusalem and the temple are actually destroyed. And that happened in 70 AD. Okay. What is next? Okay, so anyway, let me say one more thing about this. Okay, so remember that we talked about this last week. What is the last thing that has to happen in order for the scroll? Because now we've got the sixth seal open. Okay, so there's only one more seal left on the scroll. So it's still not, the scroll's not open yet. There's one more seal, the seventh seal. Okay, the most important one that was holding it shut. Okay, the last thing that has to happen is that the temple in Jerusalem needs to be destroyed. And why is that? It's because this is the shift from the old covenant of the law that could never be fulfilled. Remember when the angel's going around saying, nobody is worthy to break these seals, because nobody could fulfill the law. But now Jesus has fulfilled the law. So now when we break that seventh seal and we open the scroll so that God's will can now be accomplished on the earth, that requires the temple, the old temple, where all of the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices that the Jewish people made under the requirements of the old law, that temple has to be destroyed. That's the last thing that needs to happen. That's the seventh seal. And Jesus talks about that in Matthew 24. And here's the big thing. Here's the one main reason of many why I believe partial preterism. Because after Jesus says all these things are going to happen, here's how you're going to know when the temple's going to be destroyed. He says this is all going to happen within your generation. He says it twice. He says it to the Pharisees, and he says it to his disciples. Okay? Premillennialists just completely ignore that he says that twice. That was the thing that bothered me so much back when I was still a premillennialist. I didn't understand, why would Jesus say that? Was he just lying? Jesus doesn't lie. So I never got that part. I figured, oh, there's just something I don't understand. And then when I learned about partial preterism, all of a sudden, it all made sense. No, Jesus didn't lie at all. It happened exactly the way he said. Because when Jesus said all of this in Matthew 24, and then when I believe the sixth seal is opened, that John is seeing in his vision, I believe it's the same thing. It happened 40 years later. 40 years later after Jesus said it, okay, in 70 AD. That's when the Romans descended upon Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple, and they pretty much destroyed all of Jerusalem. We're going to talk about that at length today. Wow, yeah. So that's why I believe so strongly, because that's what Jesus said. I simply believe what Jesus said. It makes so much more sense. So at this point, sixth seal, we are experiencing birth pangs. Okay, Then last week we looked at Revelation 7. Okay, and then God talks about the 144,000 Israelites. So remember, we had kind of a pause in Revelation 7, and there's an angel that we see an angel come out, and he's got the seal of the living God. Okay, so it's not the bad seals that are being broken off the scroll. It's the new seal from God. And God says God wants to seal off 144,000 Israelites to be saved as his remnant, so that they will not be harmed when Jerusalem is destroyed. Okay, then we also see the next thing is this uncountable people of all nations and tribe and tongue, and that they are also in heaven with God at this time. And I believe that these are people from the Old Testament who had relationships with the true Lord, with the true God, creator of the universe, just like Abraham did, and it was counted to them as righteousness. This one I'm not sure positive of, but that's what I think, because I think that they are very similar to the martyrs that we see from the Old Testament. So it's a beautiful symbol of God's forgiveness and his love, so that there would have been all of this multitude of people, even back in the Old Testament, who loved God, loved the one true Lord. They did not just Israelites. We have so many examples, Rahab, and of people in the Old Testament who were not Israelites, who still respected and loved the Lord God.